Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Productive Attorney Podcast. My name is Jim Zeta. I'll be your host. This podcast talks about how you can become more productive as an attorney so you can do the things outside of practicing law that you want to do, and you can be more efficient while you practice law. This week, we're going to talk about law school. I have kind of a unique perspective on law school in that I am an adjunct professor at Texas A&M School of Law and have been an adjunct professor there for the last, I want to say 7 years. I think it was 2016 I started. I teach 3 courses at the law school. I teach law practice management, which is what some would call soft skills, marketing technology, things of that nature, and I'll go into that a little bit. I teach a class called Client Relationships and Case Evaluations. It's an accelerated class in the winter. And for the last 2 springs, I've taught Advanced Torts, which is obviously more of a substantive technical course. In the process of teaching these classes, I've offered students one-on-ones. That is, if a student wants to meet outside the class and talk about career goals or talk about anything really, I will sit down and have a conversation with them, and I've kind of developed a way of doing these one-on-ones that students seem to respond to, and I've learned a lot about them. I keep what they say in these meetings confidential, but I can give you, as we go through this podcast, a general feel of what law students are doing, what they're feeling, how things are going for law schools and law students right now, and how they may have changed, and whether it makes sense to go to law school. What can you expect? And as a lawyer, just for your knowledge, what are students thinking now that they've come out of law school? What are the people that you're going to be working with or for or against? Where their heads at? So let's start out with kind of, as I usually do, with some sort of war story or my journey. The reason why I went to law school was because I didn't know where else to go. Organic chemistry came up in college. My father was a physician. He would have liked for me to be a physician. I had worked in his emergency room. He had built a outpatient surgery center. I worked with an ER. I worked there in the ER. I also worked in some in the operating room, and it just wasn't for me. It was by very nature cold and sterile and quiet, and it didn't fit my personality right. Now, what I didn't know then, and what I wish I'd known, is that, like law, in the practice of medicine, there are multiple areas that you can make a living that don't require you to be at a hospital or don't require you to do certain types of things. A friend of mine is a radiologist, and in hindsight, I think I would have loved being a radiologist. So, that's why I went to law school. And when I decided to go to law school, and I wasn't ready to work. I was in college. I was 21 years old. I absolutely loved playing sports. I went to a small college because I could play soccer right away, and I wanted to start and play 4 years, and that was my primary reason. It was a very good college, but it was my primary reason for going there, was just to play sports. And so eventually I started to realize, I got to make a living. I got to do something. I wasn't ready. I wanted to go to graduate school. Business school didn't seem to be the answer. Medical school didn't seem to be the answer. And some people said that I had a logical, analytical mind, so I took the LSAT, did well on the LSAT, and said, yeah, that's the direction I'm going to go. Walked into my first class not knowing anything about law school. When I went to law school, there wasn't the internet, and so there was not a lot of research. You just pretty much read the book 1L, and you read a couple other books as to what to expect, but I had no idea what to expect when I walked in, and I did not like law school. I'm not a quitter, so once I started, I was going to get my way through it. But that first year was a gut punch. It still is. Most of the time you're in a new city, maybe even a new state like I was. I came from Michigan down to Texas. And you're learning things that you're not very comfortable about. They heap massive amounts of information on you with things that you don't understand. there's not a lot of explanation as to what to look for when you're reading 50, 60, 70 pages a night and of things you don't understand. And layered on top of that are two things. You have a fear of being called on in class, and that fear is real. You're with new peers, all very intelligent. They've all done very well to get where they are. Everybody there seems smarter than you. Everybody there seems more prepared than you. And your fear of getting called on and embarrassed is huge. And then on top of that, you don't get any feedback, really. At least it wasn't when I went to law school. I hear that there's a little more feedback, but not a lot. And so you don't have any idea whether you're learning the right things, whether you're going in the right direction. And that to me was exceptionally frustrating. I did okay. I was the middle of my class. And so I didn't like bomb out or anything like that, but I didn't kill it. I was never a great student anyways. Again, I was somebody who and still enjoys physical fitness and enjoys sports and enjoys camaraderie of working out more than I do the studying of things that I didn't feel like were completely relevant to my future. So there were some classes in there, constitutional law, property. I knew that those were areas that I was not going to go into. And I'm taking these courses and I'm thinking, I know I'm supposed to take them to think like a lawyer, but oh man, these things don't seem to be totally relevant to my life going forward. And what am I doing? And so, and they turned out I don't use them very much in practical law anyways, but you do need them for a basis. For the basis, I get it. But law school was not an enjoyable process for me. And then and the other thing that's layered on top of law school is, oh, by the way, at the end, you've got to take this bar exam. And this bar exam is going to require you to study for 2 months straight. And I lost my, I needed glasses after I studied for the bar exam. I remember playing basketball just after I took the bar exam, and I went on a 20-foot jump shot. I couldn't see the rim clearly anymore, and I realized it was because of all the studying I did for the bar exam. So law school's tough, and it remains tough. I will tell you that. Let me talk generally about how it's changed and how it's stayed the same. First year is still tough. I was talking in one of my one-on-ones, I was talking to a student. She was telling me about how she had to step out of class to throw up during first year. First year is going to be rough for the reasons that I said. What has changed, in my opinion, a lot is student debt. Law school has become expensive, and a lot of the students are carrying student debt from college. And so we have students that are coming out of law school with $200,000, $300,000 worth of student debt. And in those cases, that's a house. That's something that you can get a starter house for. I know housing markets are up, but you can get a starter house, or you can use that money towards that. So you're, in essence, once you get out of law school, you're going to have to pay what the functional equivalent of a starter house just to get back to square one, to get back even. And that's tough. And the fact that student debts have no relief in bankruptcy and other things tied to it, I think that student debt is a real problem that's not going away for students. And they need to consider that when they go to law school, and consider when they come out and whether they can do it or not. I felt when I was in law school, and I'm a little biased here because I teach this class, but I felt there weren't enough classes on practice management, on leadership, on apprenticeship skills, clinics, that sort of thing. For me, law school clicked when I did the criminal clinic and when I did the tax clinic. When I represented actual clients. I remember to this day a jury trial that I did in a DUI where I stood in front of a jury with a legal pad and I read my argument. I wasn't that nervous. And I told the jury before, I'm going to read my argument. It'll be more efficient for you because I'm not making stuff up. I'm telling you exactly what I want. But I'm just going to be looking at my notes. And I asked them in jury selection whether anybody would have a problem with that. And they said they didn't. And so I was reading a lot. And the fact that the client was ultimately found not guilty was great. And it made me feel great about it. I love that. And I represented, I never forget, I represented a lady who was accused of stealing cologne and perfume from a store, and I was able to get her a good deal. She was smart in that I guess smart. She took 4 bottles, and on her way out, she put 2 down, so that she could say, "Well, I was going to take them, but I didn't. There's the 2 I was going to take," but she'd taken another 2 with her. So I don't know. I thought that was clever back then. And so what I remember about that is I got a really good deal, and I was in the courthouse 2 or 3 weeks later, and she was with her friend, and she said, "Well, there's my lawyer right there, and you should hire him." And that was my first time when I felt like the pride of representing people. And I also did the tax clinic, and that was an interesting thing where people had either intentionally avoided paying taxes or had just screwed up on their taxes, and trying to help them through that against the government. And to me, that was also rewarding in that I was just able to get them through the process and steer them through the process. And so the clinics for me were invaluable. And it wasn't until I took the clinics that I felt like, hey, I can do this. I can be a lawyer. And it really clicked for me. Also, there was nobody so law school teaches us how to think like a lawyer. That's pretty much common knowledge. But it doesn't teach you what I consider to be the soft skills. And those soft skills are, the way I look at it is, just about in any service industry or any product that's out there, there's kind of 2 aspects to it. There's the technical side. So in a service industry, like being a lawyer, you have to understand how to analyze a legal issue, do the legal research, and come out with an answer. That's the technical side. If you have a factory that makes bicycles, the factory has got to be able to be set up technically to make a bicycle. And the intricacies in going into that and getting all the proper materials and running them through the proper, I don't know how a bike's made, but running them through the factory so your bike comes out at the end, that to me is the similar process of being able to analyze a legal problem, which is what law school teaches us. But once that bike is out, you got to sell it. And in law, you've got to be able to sell your service, and you have to market. There's very few classes that talk about marketing in law school. And there are lawyers who have gone out and become exceptionally successful where all they do is, they're called rainmakers. That's kind of a fancy name, but really all they are salesmen or saleswomen. And they're out there selling the law firm, selling their services, and they bring in so much business and they feed other lawyers that they barely have to do the technical side. They have to understand the technical side, but they don't have to draft a brief. They don't have to make an argument. They don't have to do a transaction. They're the ones that are just out there talking and selling people. There is very little of that in law school. I try really hard to focus on that in my law practice management class as to the different levels of marketing. So I think law schools have a way to go on that they should focus a little more on that. Also, you've got professional identity. I start my class with professional identity as to what are your core values, and I talk about that in another podcast. But you start with your core values, and then from your core values, develop goals as personal goals and goals as an attorney. You then develop from those core values professional identity, and that professional identity is who you are, how you ethically treat your practice. How hard you work, what types of cases you want to take, what types of clients you want to represent. All those things are things that they're doing a much better job of teaching at Texas A&M, where I'm teaching, than they did even 7 years ago when I started. I think professional identity, goal setting, leads to who you are, what you want to be, and then leads to some of the other softer skills such as marketing. The other thing that law schools don't teach much about, and this is another area that I think needs to be taught, is some of the background skills, administrative skills necessary to run a law firm. Things we talk about in these podcasts? Do you understand case management software? Do you know how to deal with your taxes? Do you know, when you come in, how you're going to structure your day, how you're going to manage your time. All these little soft skills that law school doesn't really teach you about. That's things that I think could change and could be made better, but schools are doing a little bit better of that. I've heard they think up to, leadership is another example. I think up to 50% of the schools now have some sort of professional identity leadership aspect, which is leaps and bounds from where they were 10 years ago when it was as low as 15% of schools had that. And so, I do these one-on-ones, and I've got law students coming out of school, and I will tell you, what I see coming out of school is not much different than when I came out of school in certain aspects, but there are other examples of it is different. So there are a wide range when students come to me in their third year and they're talking about where they want to go. You've got a set of students who are locked in, who know the area that they want to go to, and they're locked in and they're going to do it. One of the best examples is a student that I taught, I think it was in my first or second class, and she was interested in cannabis law. And this was when not as many states had legal cannabis as currently. And she just was intent on becoming an expert in that and going out and doing well in that industry. And I told her, go for it. She just came to meet, and really it was just more me affirming her than anything else. Her direction was clear, and she knew what she was doing, and she has become very successful. She was locked in, and a lot of those students are that way. Then I have students who come to me who just don't have a direction. Law school has been difficult for them. They're not sure whether they want to do transactional litigation or even whether or not they want to practice law. And for those students, I encourage them generally to just get a job, that job in an area that they can get, and then that they might have interest, and to spend a year or two almost as I always say, they're paying you to learn. A first-year associate, second-year associate, law firms are paying the associate to learn. Law firms make the money off the students' third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh year. Law firms have a problem now, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, that there's a 25% turnover of associates each year within law firms, and that's because the care and feeding of young lawyers is really poor right now, and they've got a lot of options out there. So law firms have a complete turnover in 5 years of their first-year associates, and that's a real problem for them. And we've talked about how to solve that, but that's what you've got coming out of law school. About 80% of the students that I've interviewed are going in the right direction. They know exactly what they're doing, or they have an idea, or like the one student who wasn't sure, they're still going to go in the right direction and get a job. Of 20% of the students, though, for whatever reason, are just taking a right when they should take a left, and they realize it when we walk through and discuss where they are and what direction they're going in. And that's where I think mentors are hugely important, where law students need to talk to as many people as possible who are in the industry or in the world, and be open and honest with them as to where they're going, because then people might be able to help them and get them in the right direction. So I tell students that, I talk to these students and say, that there are 80-20 rule, and you're in the 80 or you're in the 20, and here's why I believe that's the case. I am seeing a trend in the students in law school this last couple of years that I haven't seen before, and that is they are more socially conscious than ever. I call them my social justice warriors. There are many, many students that I've been teaching in the last 2 years who, I'm not saying they don't want to make money, but their main goal is to make a difference. They really want to make a difference. And what's unfortunate for them is that when I get them sit down and do a business plan, which is what we do at the end of my law practice management class, and walk them through their business model with respect to being socially conscious, oftentimes the money just doesn't work out. A lot of people that are in the socially conscious area are students whose parents have struggled, who are there on scholarship or who are there through loans, and they want to go back to their communities and they want to go back in and provide the services for their communities that they recognize the communities were lacking when they were there. And that is a hugely laudable goal, and I want those students to make that goal. What ends up happening is when we go through the finances of what it takes to run a law firm and what they need to live and survive, especially in those cases with students with student debt, it becomes very difficult for those students. I don't want to say impossible because several of my students are doing it. They're trying to do it. And one of the ways that students are doing that are going into areas that provide these types of services, these socially conscious areas, and they're going to firms where they can make a salary first and then they can branch off and do their own place. I think that those students are very honorable, are necessary for our society, and it kills me that we can't put those students in the places where they can do their most good because of financial constraints. They also, this is the first group with iPhones. They've had iPhones for 15 years now. They don't get their news in the traditional way. They have so much more information than when most lawyers graduated from law school. They know salaries of everywhere. They know what's pros and cons of different firms, which is why they move around so much. They get their news in non-traditional ways. They don't read newspapers, but they get it in a million different locations. And so we've got a unique set of individuals that are coming out of law school now. The idea is the same. Lawyers help people and businesses with problems that they cannot handle or they do not want to handle. I mean, that's what we do. We help people out with that kind of stuff, and you just have to find those people that you can help and then help them. And in consideration of that, they pay you for your time, they pay you for your efforts, and you make a living for you and your family, and that's what the practice of law generally is. I will tell you that what's becoming popular now, it's been out there for a while, but the phrase is becoming more popular is the JD advantage. And that is if you are a graduate from law school but aren't necessarily going to practice law, but you want to go into other areas, be a chief operating officer, be in HR, run an HR of a big company, a number of areas where you could apply with a JD, you will have the advantage over an MBA. You will have the advantage over someone coming out of college with that JD advantage. It's just a cost benefit. Is it worth the time, 3 years, and the cost, $100,000, $200,000, to have that advantage for the rest of your life? Some people say yes. Many CEOs are attorneys who are not practicing. The other advantage that I see with law students now is the UBE, the uniform. I can't even know what the word is, but the law school exam that you can now, the bar exam, uniform bar exam, you can go out and get the UBE, and now you can get licensed in multiple states. Before, it was much more challenging if you wanted to move from one state to another to be able to practice law in another state. But with UBE and with looser rules, it's easier to move. So I think that's an advantage for students. And finally, we come down to money, and we talk about money, how that's super important. I want people in law school to understand, lawyers to understand the median 50%. So if you take the lawyers' salaries and you go in the middle, 25% to 75%. So the middle 50% of lawyers make between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. You, with $100,000 to $200,000 a year, can survive in our society with that money. And so law school can prepare you to make a living in and support yourself and significant others and loved ones if necessary, and make a difference by being a leader, by providing advice, by providing direction. Big firms right now, the salary structure, you start at $215,000 a year, and by 8th year, you're making $415,000 a year. That's real money. You can do a lot with that kind of money. If you want shiny things, you can have those if you want to, but you can pay off your debt, which is great as well. And so, the big thing on that is when you come out of law school is what is the culture you want? What do you want to see when you get out of law school? Where do you want your law firm to be? Where do you want your law practice to be? How do you want your life as a lawyer to be? Comes full circle back to what we talked about in the first class. What are your core values? What are your goals? And how can you use law school to reach those goals? And I would encourage lawyers to every once in a while go back and think, why is it that I went to law school? When I graduated from law school, when I was idealistic, what was it that I wanted to accomplish? And am I doing that now? Or and we all have growth, and as we grow, we change, and we become more clear. But if you go back and you look at your core values and you look at some of your goals, they probably haven't changed that much since you went to law school. So that's my thoughts of law school. I encourage anybody, if you have any insights on this, to let me know. My email is jim@zetafirm.com, or you can go to the Productive Attorney and send a note. I love to hear what people have to say about law school. So that's it. This is Jim Zeta. Hope you have a great week. Thanks.